Hey, welcome back, everyone. So, just as a quick reminder, we do still have some things open for this coming SGDQ. Prize submissions are open from now until June 9th. So, if you'd like to try to add a prize to SGDQ, now's the time to do it. We also have offsite volunteer applications that open on May 19th. So, keep your eyes open for that. We also have registration and refund deadline. There is a deadline if you are still able to register at all, or if you would like a refund. That is open until May 27th. So if any reason you are able to no longer attend this upcoming SGDQ, or a spot somehow opens up and you would like to attend, you have until May 27th to do that. So don't forget about those. And you can also check our Twitter for hotfix moderator applications. I can talk. So there is hotfix moderator applications open now. You can just go on Twitter for that. It's super easy. So I'm going to throw you all over to Tetra and Pidge, who are going to be doing a randomizer development showcase. All right, ladies, take it away.
Thank you so much, Fufu. So I am Tetra, and I'm joined here by Pidge.
Hello.
Hey, and hey, Pidge, what if I told you in the next hour we could make a randomizer?
I'd say that's pretty cool because it takes me more than an hour to develop a single randomizer feature.
Yes, well, normally it will take more, and this would be a relatively simple example randomizer, but I think it's important for everyone out there who may be thinking about wanting to create a randomizer or perhaps work on an open source randomizer that other folks in the community have created, to learn how they can actually manipulate ROMs, randomize, shuffle things. And it's really not as hard, at least for some features, as you might think it is, especially if you can do a little bit of programming in Python. So the way I made this work is ahead of time, I created and put on GitHub what I call Seedling. Seedling is, you can think of it as a template for a randomizer. So this is what it looks like when you load it up locally. It will give you the insert game name here, web randomizer. Obviously, we want to do a little bit of customization. So what I'm going to be doing, at least for this hour, is to show you how I would go about creating a randomizer for Super Mario Brothers 2 US. I've already created a randomizer for it that isn't web-based, but we'll be going through and I'll be able to show you a little bit about how that is done. And I hope that regardless of how experienced you are with programming, everyone in the audience can learn at least something in the next hour. So, yay.
Hooray!
All right, so first thing, let's actually give it a name. So we'll customize this a little bit, just to get started. This is something that ahead of time, I basically did what's called a Git clone. What that essentially does is it takes the template, oops, spelled bros correctly. It takes the template from GitHub and then copies it to your local computer. And then I've loaded it in a handy dandy text editor here. So if I refresh now, oh, look, I actually changed the game name. And now this is starting to look like more of a finished randomizer. Obviously, we have a little bit more work to do.
Very nice, very nice. For anybody in the chat who might feel like a little intimidated by the prospect of coding, luckily Python is it's a very, very good language to get started with. I kind of learned Python pretty quickly. A lot of Python is written as close to plain English as a programming language can get. Like you can actually see in Tetra's code here, she's written the line game name equals Super Mario Bros. 2. Like that, I think that's pretty easy to understand, and that actually did change the game name in her web browser.
Yep. So for example, if I wanted to talk a little bit more about the randomizer, I would go to the template that does that. I always get them mixed up. I think it's about.html. Yeah, so what we're looking is on the right side. See how it says a program that can randomize stuff for game name. That corresponds to this little bit of text right here. So if I want to add things and stuff, for example. And then I hit refresh on my browser. Now all of a sudden I've changed it so that even though this may look a little bit intimidating because there's all these little HTML tags like UL, this is basically all we're doing is customizing an existing one. And if you are really talented with HTML or CSS or other things, you can change it all you want. If you want to keep it the way it is, that's cool too.
That was actually the first thing I contributed to the SMRPG randomizer was changes in the web templates before I knew how to code in Python, because HTML is fairly easy to learn. It's all just like markup. It's actually one of the first things that most people learned as an introduction to getting into coding.
Yep. And then as another example, if you want to see, and by the way, I do want to make sure, even if you can't read this, Dorkmaster Fleck, who was the original author for SMRPG Randomizer, as well as VTorp from Link to the Past Randomizer, did a lot of the legwork. I mean, I definitely took some of what they did, modified it, made it a little simpler, cleaned it up, but really shout outs to those two for doing the work that led to the creation of Seedling, because I couldn't have done it without them.
I'm really glad that that was the basis for this, because like that's the only randomizer I've ever worked on.
Well, Pidge, there is a reason why I asked you to commentate with me, but in addition to being just an awesome speedrunner in person.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. All right, so one of the things in programming that we often do just to make sure that things are working okay and that what you're doing really does make sense is write a hello world program. Why hello world? I don't know exactly, but that's sort of like a traditional thing in programming. So right here, I have a relatively simple print statement. We're going to, and by the way, this is the method or function that's going to be called. This is probably going in a little bit more technical detail than we need to get to now, but the way web-based randomizers work is that there's a web server and then there's a client. The web server is going to basically generate what's called a patch. So basically, hey, take the byte right at this location and change it to be this value, stuff like that. And then the web browser will take a ROM in memory and then patch it using those particular things, and then write it to disk so that that way you have your randomized ROM. So if I go to generate randomized game, and we have as an example flag, shuffles a thing. So nothing too complicated here. The description of this flag is, if programmer writes code to shuffle a thing, this will shuffle a thing. So we're going to be shuffling a thing, clearly. And to show you how this works, I've already uploaded a Mario 2 ROM here. So if I click Generate ROM, it will show you, okay, we're going to turn the thing shuffling mode on, and undefined, but we'll work on those a little bit later. And we'll have a Mario 2 ROM that comes up, and our nice emulator here with that particular seed number. So far this is pretty vanilla. Nothing's really been changed because we're not actually adding anything to that patch. So far so good, Pitch?
So far, so good. The patch code is actually really cool. I was just going to add that if you're not too familiar with like the code structure of older video games, which I expect most people are not, what the patch code essentially does is that it outputs like what we're trying to randomize, and it converts it into hex code that the game can understand. It looks at what's supposed to be at a certain location in the game's code and just changes it. And that's essentially the basis of how randomizers work. So the patch code is essentially taking what we're writing out for instructions in Python, and it's converting it into something that you can actually patch into the original game's ROM, which you can actually look at in a Hex Editor and see a whole mess of numbers. But that whole mess of numbers is actually instructions that the game is trying to follow to make it follow the logic that it has. So it's really, really cool when you apply the patch code and see it like actually come to life in the emulator.
That actually leads me right into the next thing I was going to do, which was to open this up in a Hex Editor and then show you and introduce the concept of a ROM map. So you can, by the way, is having the Mario Tube theme in the background good for having a little music while we're coding?
I love it.
All right, let's do that then. So, all right, so you can think of a ROM map as sort of a Rosetta Stone for like where and what ones and zeros in the ROM, what they actually mean. So what this is basically saying is that, let me pick a good example. Let's see. So I'm just going to go through. One of the things that I wanted to work on was particularly in honor of Cleric's run that's going to be coming up really soon. I think in a couple of hours, she's going to be doing a Mario 2 All Princess speedrun. What we can do is, let's see if we can make a feature that changes the princess's floating time. So we see here, this is going to be in 1442F. So that's basically saying that this address written in hexadecimal is where the floating time is going to be. So if we scroll all the way down to 1444. Okay, so this is starting with 14420, and F is going to be all the way over here. So we see a value of 3C, which I think, what is that, around 50 or 60 in decimal? This is written in...
It's 60. I have a calculator open.
Thank you, Pidge, because I didn't, and I'm not as prepared as you. So, awesome.
I actually have it open for my segment later, so I'm glad I accidentally was prepared.
Yeah. Let me see. Oh, it actually might be a little bit one down because of the header. Okay, well, we're getting a little bit far ahead of ourselves. But what I'm thinking is but this is basically what's going on, is that we're looking in the ROM at a particular location, and then going to make sure that it works after we change that value to something else that's more interesting. The other thing we can do, just sort of as a more, before we start actually changing the ROM itself, is we can change a little bit of the text in the game, just to make sure that we're able to actually affect things in the ROM. So if we go to, let's see, I don't remember where it is here. Oh, here we go. So this is talking about the character select screen. What I'm thinking we can do is change, when you load up your ROM and you go to, oops. Let's see if I can get this working. Oops. I might have an issue with the... Sorry, one sec, folks. It wouldn't be a GDQ without some sort of technical issue. Let me just make sure I can get these configured correctly. One sec.
Configuring emulator controls is like kind of the bane of my existence the last couple weeks.
Yeah, basically.
Especially like because I've been configuring them to a parallel port controller, which like for some reason just likes to randomly stop working and need its drivers reinstalled every so often.
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess like for those in chat wondering, just like touch a bit more on the hex stuff that we're seeing in this browser window on Tetris screen. A lot of very popular games, especially a lot of ROM hackers like before us have already done a lot of the documentation on what exactly is where in the code. If you're looking to make a randomizer of a certain game, a lot of the times you can look up ROM maps of a game that you like, and you can see like locations for the things that you want to change and already know where they are. And that makes your job very easy. But if you're trying to make a randomizer for a game where there's something, or it's not as well documented, or there's something you want to change that you don't know where it is yet, you would need to do something a little more difficult and go into like an emulator and look at a RAM map, and that gets a lot more complicated. But luckily for SMB2, a lot of it is already documented.
Yeah, exactly. So that makes our job a lot easier. If you're working with a game that hasn't been as widely mapped, then that's going to be a lot of extra work that you need to do in order to make that happen. But it's still definitely doable in terms of if you're able to figure out what ROM locations correspond to certain things, to be able to make them more useful and understand what the ROM does. All right, so let's, to use an example, let's go back to the floating time. Because it's relatively easy to change these characters and what they're doing. So let's change the princess's floating time to be something else. So if we're going to put this as a location, we have, we're going to write to 1442F right here. And then we have to pick a value to write to it. So if we look here and, oh, I'm sorry, it would be 10 more than that, I think. And I'm trying to remember whether these include the NES header offset, and I'm forgetting right now. But let's just say if it's 2.5 here. How about let's do it something between maybe 10 and 50? Does that sound about reasonable, Pitch?
That sounds pretty reasonable to me.
Yep. Okay. So we want to basically figure out what a random number is between, certain values. So we can use the Python random library. So let's just, since I sometimes always forget the syntax, let's just look it up right here. So we want, I believe the right method we want is like choice. We're initializing the random number generated with our seed number. So whenever you put in a seed number in a randomizer, that's going to basically give it sort of a particular state of the random number generation. Technically, it's not random. It's based on a pseudo-random state inside of it. So that's why you always put in a seed number, because if everyone on different computers enters the same seed number, they can then get the same results. Oops. Sorry, I have a little bit of a police activity outside. I'm not sure if the siren is carrying through. Sorry about that.
It's just randomized SMB2 music. Don't worry about it.
Of course, yeah. No worries. Okay, so let's try to get some new speed. We can call it new float time. And we're going to say random.randint, which is this method over here. So this is my cheat sheet that tells me if I want to get a random number between some number A and B, we can just use this method here. So let's say we want it between 10 and 50, just for example. Although we're going to be working in, I keep forgetting we're in hexadecimal here.
I've made that mistake very, very, very many times in SMRPG Randomizer, and I've made several soft locks as a result.
Yeah, and I very well might have a soft lock that I cause or something weird tonight. So if that happens, we can just say, that's never happened before.
That's half the fun.
Yep. Yeah, so let's put right there our new float time. So we're going to write to that particular location this new float time that we have. Okay, so we can say changing float. I can spell. It's always when you're in front of a large audience that you know, you can't seem to spell correctly. Don't you hate when that happens?
I sure do.
Okay, so
this is pretty cool. You're going to be writing the new float time amount to 1442F, and that was 1442F was the location of Peach's float time that you found in that wiki, correct?
exactly.
Okay, awesome. Do you mind if I link that in the chat?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah. All right, so now that we've changed this here, and hopefully that will get picked up. So this is, what I'm showing you here is the web server. I remember when I was saying before that there's sort of a concept of a server and a client or browser. What I'm going to do is in my browser, reload here, and you'll be able to see these messages, which means that I'm getting a particular web page. Here we're calling the randomized one, and it's also getting, you know, our logo and some other things like that. So let's see if we can get something fun to happen. So we'll pop in a seed number. I'm just going to choose it arbitrarily, and we'll do generate ROM. Okay, and we see hello world, which is what we printed out right here. And since that flag is enabled, we're going to go into this section here. So it's going to print out the new float time, which is right down here. In this case, it rolled low. So we can try it again and see if we can get one that rolls higher. Oops. Well, that's too big. Let's try a different one. It looks like... Let's see if I can get this to be... There we go. Here's one that's a little bit different. So this one rolled up a little bit high.
That's a nice one.
Yeah, it always makes for a better demonstration. Hopefully, assuming that I got the right value, which is always an assumption. So let's get this loaded up to see if we can get it working. And let me just configure my inputs one more time because this is going to be wonky like that. I normally use a different computer when I'm coding, so it's going to be a little bit trickier to do it here. Okay. So let's see if I can do that. Did that seem to change her floating time? Oh, it looks... I used the wrong keys for this. Let me try configuring it to a different... I'm sorry, folks. One sec. It's always tricky finding hotkeys that FCEUX doesn't bind to other things. Let's try N and M. All right, let me just try loading this again. I'm having a lot of trouble getting FCEUX to work correctly. I'm really sorry, folks.
That's okay. I've had the same thing happen to me several times.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out a way to get... can we, like, turn all hotkeys off? Well... What's the best way to do this, to find some that aren't being used elsewhere? Sorry, one sec, folks. Okay, this looks a little bit better. Welcome to the wonderful world of randomizer development.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Now, do you see how, I don't know if that's actually working. This may not be the right variable. I might have used a different one. So we might have to go back to the drawing board a little bit since it doesn't look like her floating time is that much different.
Finding the right address to write to is like 75% of randomizer development.
Yeah, it really is. So I think what I'm going to do is let's try going up by 16. Oftentimes when people write their ROM maps, they're done for the addresses in the sort of raw memory as opposed to up including the header that's at the very beginning. So basically what's going on, let me just explain that in a little bit more detail. The very first 16 bytes, see it starts with NES and then a couple of these other characters. What that is it's a series of characters that are added at the start of a ROM that's in the file on the computer, but not in the ROM that's like on an actual NES or console itself. So oftentimes when you get a number here, you have to add 10 in order to correspond to adding it to the header as well, because everything is sort of shifted by 16 bytes. So let's try this again, back to the drawing board.
That's interesting. I didn't know about that.
Yeah,
I don't think SNES games have that.
Yeah, I know it is the case for NES games, so that's a little bit different. The other thing we can do is just try running it again and see what happens. Okay, so let's go back to the randomizer. We'll reload it up with a different code. And then sometimes I just like to add something just to make sure that we're doing the right thing and that our changes are actually being reflected. So let's see if we can add something like hello again, just something to make sure that you know that the changes are actually going into place. So there we know we have our hello again, change the float time. The other thing that I realized is that doing it a random number might not make it big enough to really know for sure whether it's going to be different. So let's try, instead of making it a random number, let's just pick something really high and different to make sure it is working. Does that sound like a good plan?
That sounds like a good plan.
All right.
If it's longer than 1.5 seconds, I guess we'll know that it's working, right?
I think so. Again, emphasis on the think part. You never see. This is the thing about rando dev. You never really know what you're going to get.
This is very true.
Yep. So if I do another generate, looks like we got an error here. Oh, that's right. I didn't want to actually make this a random. I just wanted to set it equal to 80 in hex. So, oops. But that's the nice thing about programming. If you make a mistake, you can try it again. So we're going to change it to 80. All right, let's see if we have any better luck this time. Set up my hotkeys. Oh, I'm sorry, my input again. For some reason, I haven't been able to get CEUX to keep the hotkeys. I'm probably just doing something wrong or forgetting something and don't really want to check for it, while everyone's watching. Let's see if we can get this working. All right, so there's our princess. We'll come down here. Oop. I don't know if that actually changed her float time either. Yeah, it doesn't look like it. So we might need to go back to the drawing board again.
Yeah, it looked like it was the same. I count like how many oscillations she does in the air.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so what I can do is, since I didn't remember that, let's try going back to the other thing. Maybe I was actually right the first time. Weirder things could definitely happen with Randomizer. So let's try this again. We'll reload our code here. And let's pick another number. I'm just sort of picking an arbitrary seed, since it doesn't really matter when we don't have anything randomized there. So while we're doing this pitch, tell me a little bit more about the work that you've done on the Mario RPG randomizer.
Oh, I actually haven't been on the team for that long. So like a couple months ago, we were like looking into shuffling the chests because it's actually very hard to do an SMRPG because all the treasure chests are coded as events. So like actually being able to change the value of what they give you is like kind of difficult. So L&M actually like did all the ROM hacking work for that, and then Dorkmaster Fleck made all the class structures surrounding the chests. And then I had written out like a big, huge Google Doc of how the shuffle logic should work, but because I didn't know any actual Python code back then, I was like, you know what? I can come up with some logic for this, but I can't like actually code it. But then that was like kind of when SMRPG Randomizer blew up, and then all of a sudden the only two devs working on this project had a ton of work on their plate. So I said, you know what? I'm just gonna bite the bullet. I'm just gonna sit down. I'm gonna learn Python like one night, and then I'm actually gonna try and code this stuff for them. So I did that. I did chess shuffle, and I redid the shop shuffle. I redid all the pricing for things because the item pricing was kind of like leftover from the old linear randomizer, wasn't very balanced. So I rebalanced that. Probably the coolest thing I did was I made an entrance randomizer for Bowser's Keep, which is like, if you've played Mario RPG before, one of the final dungeons of the game is Bowser's Castle, and there's a room where there's 6 different doors you can go in, and there are 2 that are platforming doors, there are 2 puzzle doors, and 2 battle doors. So what I ended up doing was I moved all the rooms around. So you might walk into a door and have to do 3 rooms in a row where like one is an action door, one's a battle door, and one's a puzzle door. Make it 2 puzzle doors and a battle door. You never know. It's all random. But I also added a feature where you don't necessarily have to do 4. You might only have to do 1 door to get through to the bosses, because that dungeon was kind of like the one that everybody hated doing and always put off to the end. So to make routing a little bit more interesting, I changed the requirements of the dungeon.
Oh, interesting.
That's like kind of the most recent one that I did, like just the quality of life thing. The next thing that I'm going to be adding to it is a way to skip the factory dungeon at the end of the game, because currently that's required in every single seed. It has 6 boss fights, it's very long, very arduous, and it's kind of like something that's kind of a pain to do. If you've played enough randomizer seeds, you kind of get sick of doing the same thing every time. So what I actually want to do in my segment tomorrow is show off developing a way to warp to the final boss from Great Guy's Casino, but I'm very, very sick today, and I don't know if I'm going to be feeling any better tomorrow. So if I'm not, then I won't be doing that segment. If I'm feeling okay, then I will, but either way, that feature is getting released tomorrow, so something to look forward to.
All right, so while you were stalling for time for me, I think I figured out what was wrong.
Awesome. What's up?
So what was wrong was that I was right in that it was the 14.4.2f, not 3f. The thing, though, is that the value at 14.4.2f is actually in hexadecimal 3c. So I was giving it a lower value, not a higher value, which didn't make sense there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. So let's try something a little bit different then. So what we can do is maybe make it something really, really big. Like we can even go to, how about FF, something that's like super duper big, or F0, something like that. Let's see if this works any better. I'm hoping it will. And I think my cat who's sitting on my lap is also hoping it will too. She just loves attention. Unfortunately, we don't get to do webcam for these things, or otherwise I would put it on my cat. But anyway, so we're going to change the float time to F0. Let's see if we can get this working now. All right. One more time. We can do this, right?
Spirit bomb.
I believe in myself.
I believe in you too.
Thank you, Pidge.
Anytime, that's what I'm here for.
Alright, so let's try loading this up. We'll get Princess to... We'll choose the Princess here. Now let's see what sort of float we get now. Well, I have to wait for her to come down here.
The truth.
Ooh, look at that. It's a little bit longer.
Yeah, that does look a little bit longer.
The interesting thing now is that we can also do other things that's a little bit more complicated than even just the princess's time. What if we went back to the drawing board and actually changed each character's time? So, I'm sorry, not each time, each of their stats. So for example, we see that this is where Mario's like jump speed and gravity and floating time and some other things are. What if we then mix them up and change them so that different characters had different stats? And then Mario might even be able to get floating time. Who knows? So what we can do... Oh, sorry, what were you saying?
Oh no, sorry, I just coughed.
Oh, no, that's totally okay. All right, so let's say we want to exchange their jump speeds. So what we can do is look in the memory. Let's start with Mario, just to give one example. Here's a bunch of jump speeds. Some have, it's different with an object, without an object. We can just do, now let's do a couple of these to start with. Probably these 6. So we can look up in our handy-dandy Hex Editor what the values are. So we're going to start at 143E3. So that's going to be down here, I believe. So 143E3. So this byte, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So these are going to be his 7 jump speeds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So let's copy these values over here. So we can say Mario speeds, and then we can make them into a nice little array here. Now, it's important to always work in hexadecimal. You've made that mistake about mixing up decimal and hexadecimal, right, Pidge?
Oh, constantly. Constantly.
Yeah. Yep. So this should give you an example. And then even if we don't wind up making too many changes in this hour, this will also give you a picture of what Randomizer dev actually looks like. Sometimes it is very tedious like this, right?
Oh, yeah, it really is. Like, especially when I have to write out super, super, super long hex strings when I'm, like, changing an event in SMRPG to something totally different.
Yep. Yeah, I know, I can imagine. Okay, so then we're going to do the same thing for Toad. Toad's first jump speed starts at 143FA. So let's look that up over here. 143FA. I think it's going to be this one here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Or did we have 6 or 7? I think it was 7 actually, because there's one for quicksand as well. We probably won't get up to a world with quicksand, but want to actually be able to do these. Yeah. So then the other thing that we can do is basically basically write them to different places in memory. So this is effectively like we're reading in the values from memory. Because of the way the web randomizer works, we have to actually enter these manually into the code because it's important to remember we're writing code that's going to be up in the web server. It's not going to actually have access to the ROM. So that's why we need to actually go through these manually to make it work.
Right, right.
Hopefully that made sense to at least some folks. Yep. So let's do the same thing for the other characters here. Luigi looks like his starts at 14411. That's going to be right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think this is right. And I'm basically just using what's already been done in the ROM map as sort of my guide. And then I'm thinking what we'll do is sort of shuffle these 4 arrays and then write them to the 4 locations corresponding to the different characters. So that way you might have the princess with the jumping speed of Mario, for example, after we do this randomization. But we'll do the last one for the princess right here. So this is 14428.
Could
the
we
things we do for randomizers.
Could we, in theory, have Peach running at Toad's speed? Because I think that would look like super funny.
Now you're giving me ideas.
Ooh, I like the sound of that.
Yeah. Now, we might want to finish up the jumping ones first. Although you wanted, what value would you change to make that feature work, Pidge?
I would have to take Oh, is this only applying to the princess's running jump speeds right now?
Yeah, what I'm doing is taking there's 7 values, and there's depends on whether she has a something she's carrying or not, and whether we're doing a power jump or a running jump.
Correct. So I would have to take 1433 onward. It looks like in this ROM map that you have open in your browser. Yeah, and replace them with Toad's running speeds.
Yeah, we could totally do that as well.
That sounds fun. That was also just like a really silly suggestion I had. If you wanted to do something else, it's totally fine.
Well, if we have time remaining, I'm not. Well, let's see if we have time remaining, and then we can get to even more features. So the other thing I'm realizing might make sense is to make an array with. So these are the 7 values here, or sort of 7 sets of values. If I create a something called speeds and use a sort of second level array, what I can do is say speeds dot append to this one. So basically what I'm going to do is for each of these, this is a little bit complicated, but I'm adding an array of 7 speeds to a larger array. So sometimes you would call it a 2D array. But the idea is that we can then take those 4 and then write them to different parts of the memory itself in different locations. So that way different characters would roll differently. Hopefully this makes sense, Pitch?
It does, yeah.
Okay, good. See, that sometimes when you're programming, just having a second opinion is really helpful, because you can just make the silliest mistake and just have no idea what it is. And then if someone's looking over your shoulder and says, oh, you forgot a comma there, or something like really trivial.
Yeah, I love the SMRPG randomizer dev channels for that, because like I only recently started getting into the ROM hacking side of it, so pretty much like everything I ever did was wrong at first. And thankfully, like, it's there to be like, oh yeah, you totally like can't do that in event. Here's an alternative idea, you could try it. I'm like, dang it!
That's really cool. Yeah, unfortunately, the randomizers that I've written, there aren't really the same sort of dev teams. I haven't really had more folks interested in working collaboratively on these randomizers, so sometimes I've just sort of been on my own to figure out problems. But that sounds like really great, and hopefully we can encourage even more people to get involved with randomizer development.
So for anybody coming in now that hasn't been here for the rest of the tutorial, just kind of a recap. What Tetra is doing right now is she's writing down these long hex addresses. So for example, 0x0143E3, that specifically points to a certain point in the game's code that she wants to change a value at. So at each point in the code, there's a certain value, like how fast does a character move when they're in a certain state. That is stored somewhere in the game's code, but she's found exactly where that is, and she's overwriting the value there to make it different, so that when she loads the ROM into her emulator, it's going to be the gameplay is going to be a little bit different.
Yep, exactly. So what I'm going to do now is just to explain, we have 4 different sets of speeds for the 4 characters, and I'm using this random.shuffle method. So what that's going to do is shuffle this sequence or array basically in place. So that means you can sort of think of it as that there's 4 things in this bag of speeds, and it's going to shuffle them around to different places. So now what I'm going to do is I have 4 different things in a random order, and then 4 addresses corresponding to where the ROM is going to look for these speeds. So what I'm going to do is for each one of these, so I'll use a little for loop. So for, let's just call our counting variable A, it doesn't really matter what it is. And then we'll give it in a range of, let's say off by 1 errors are definitely a thing here. Basically 0, 1, 2, 3, so it's going to be range 0, 4. So this is going to mean it's going to run this code inside the for loop 4 different times with a value of A is 0, 1, and 2, and 3. We use 0 indexes because that's how computers sort of think of them. They start with 0, humans start with 1, but similar ways of thinking. And I'm sure you've made an off by 1 error before, right, Pidge?
Oh yeah, I've only been a developer for like 17 years.
Yep. So what we'll do is we'll add, let's try, we're going to use this patch add method. So we're going to say, we're going to add addresses A. So that's going to be either 0, 1, 2, or 3. And what we're going to do is write speeds and then A. So basically what it's going to do is for each of the indexes in the array, take one of these addresses and one of these speeds chosen randomly, and write this value, this set of values here, to that location. So hopefully this will work. This will work correctly. I'm not 100% sure, and knowing me, there's probably some typo, but we'll see. Maybe I can get lucky and do it right on the first try.
If hopefully it does work, but if it doesn't, I think one thing we should check is to load the randomized ROM and the original ROM and see if the values actually change, because I'm wondering if there's a problem with the actual patch applying code that is outside of here.
That's actually very possible. I didn't even think of that. So let's see if it works, and then if not, we'll have to get back to the drawing board there. But yeah, we can, once we get this working, also do this for other things in memory too. So let's try working with Mario first, and we'll see how Mario behaves. Here's the moment of truth, folks. Ooh. Yeah, it doesn't look like it's really changed that much. We'll try one more character, but then I think it's possible you might be right, Pidge, unfortunately.
Yeah, in which case it would look like everything you're doing here is right, but for some reason it's just not applying it.
Yeah, that might be what's going on here. Oops. We'll let the shy guy kill. So that's probably the next thing. You're right. That's a really good idea for how to look into that. So let's get the ROM and we'll open it up in my downloads file here. So this is my NES file. Okay, I'm wondering why it's so big. Well, I'll have to figure that out later. But let's
Side note,
open this up.
I love that the Shy Guy just like tried to push you off the edge there.
Yeah. Okay, so let's open up. This is the latest one at 8:37. Okay, let's see if I can get this open up in my Hex Editor. I kind of want to open it up. Oh, here we go. That works. Yeah, so I have both the vanilla ROM on the left here, and then my randomized ROM over on the right.
Let's compare some numbers.
Yeah, there might be a file compare method. So let's compare these two. What do you know? The chosen files are identical. That could be part of the problem.
Oh, dang, yeah, I guess that would mean the patch code isn't applying because people in chat were saying earlier that the float time looked the same, so it might have just been my confirmation bias saying it looked different.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I wasn't entirely sure myself. Yeah, I know I made a couple of changes to this framework earlier, so I'm wondering if something related to that might be the problem. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to figure that out on the fly, just because it'd probably take a little bit of debugging over on my end. But based on your experience with the Mario RPG framework, do you have any idea where we might look?
That I'm actually not sure.
But
okay, yeah, I'm not sure about that because like the patch code was already written before I joined the dev team. I've never like actually looked into it too deeply, but you know, I can have a look around through the code while we buy some time.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So yeah, it's going to return from. Oops, let me open up the right file. Yeah, so basically we know that this run method here is what actually writes the patch, and this is going to call self get patch. So basically what's going on here is that this randomizer is going to inherit the method from the customized randomizer, which is the file that I was writing earlier here. And then this is going to have this get patch, which it should be inheriting there. And it's definitely being called and getting the patch here. I'm not sure exactly what's happening. It's definitely going into each address.
I don't see in your console. I don't see patch written. I don't see that laying there. So maybe this isn't running properly.
That's actually a really good point. So
this is what programming is.
Yeah, basically. So it's going through each one of these. Yeah, and oftentimes debugging is going to be, you know, it's just going to be something little that, you know, because computers will do exactly what you tell them, basically. So that's a good point. It's not saying patch written, but we know that the get patch method is being called. So maybe we can try adding another print statement here. What's a fun? What do you put in print statements, Pid, just for fun little things?
John Madden football.
That's too sportsy.
John Madden randomizer.
All right.
I'm sorry. This is what happens when I'm sick.
All right, here we go. Let's see if this works. Wow. Yeah, you must have had a lot of fun at RPG Limit Break.
Oh yeah, lots of fun and very little sleep. My run ended at like 4 a.m. EST.
Okay, so we got our hello world. It's not actually calling John Madden Randomizer. Uh-oh.
Ooh.
Huh, so that's very interesting because the get data method seems to be getting called, but not by this run method here.
I hate it when my John Madden randomizer doesn't get called.
Yeah. I don't know if I can quite say the thing, but yeah, I'm definitely puzzled why it's not called as well. How are we doing on time, by the way, Paige? I want to be mindful to the other runners and not go chasing various things for too long if we're holding up. All right, well, hopefully we can figure out exactly what's going on here. But if not, even if it didn't really become the type of thing where you could actually see a demonstration of it working, because, you know, that's the other thing about doing programming. Whenever you have a large audience, you know, people looking over your shoulders virtually, there's always going to be something goes wrong and the live demo is going to fail. But I'm really hopeful that folks at least sort of understand a little bit more about what goes into randomizing ROMs, and that perhaps somebody might in the future use this framework to create a randomizer of their own once they see that minus a couple of these really annoying issues, you really can do cool things with ROMs.
I'm also like having a look through the SMRPG randomizer code to see what I can find.
Oh, yeah, no worry. I'm sure, and you know what's probably going to happen is that as soon as I cut stream, I'm going to instantly know what it is and be like, oh, I should have changed this thing right there. But yeah, that's part of programming for you. There's going to be frustrations, and it's like speedrunning. Sometimes you might have a session where you go for, you know, a whole hour and you don't get any runs started, and it's really frustrating. But when you do get something that works, it really does make up for it, I think. When you say pitch?
I would definitely agree with that. It took me like 2 weeks to get Bowser Door Entrance Shuffle working in SMRPG Randomizer, and I like popped off into a different dimension when it finally worked.
Yeah. So I think what might be going on is this views.py file. This is where when you call, like, you know, this randomize URL that's here, what it will do is actually, URLs. What this will do is basically if you go randomize, this will call views randomize view. So let's just sort of trace this through. So we're going to start here. We can go to views, and then where is randomize view? Over here. So it's using that randomize template. So let's see if we can take a look in here, see if we can figure out what's going on. This is the client-side code, so I don't think any of that is going to be
I think it might actually be. I'm looking in randomized HTML, and I think some of this patch code actually might be relevant to what we're looking for.
Oh, really? What? Where exactly?
The
applying the seed here?
Yeah, probably the apply seed function. I don't know necessarily. It does have a ROM parse patch function in there and a resolve patch, so this might be like a clue on where the problem could be.
Yeah, although what I'm thinking though is that this is client-side and that it's probably a server-side issue if it's not actually calling that run method.
Yeah, you're right. If it's not calling our John Madden randomizer, that could imply that it's not necessarily here.
Yeah, exactly. So let me see if there's anywhere else I can look that might be going on. There's always something. So where is that run being called from? Because we know even if we're not getting the John Madden randomizer being called, we do know that this code in get patch is being called. So I wonder where else we have a call to get patch. Maybe it's somewhere else in here. So that's the one right after John Madden Randomizer. So it can't be that. Is it in this file? No. Nothing here. Yeah, as much as I hate to... oh wait, we do have one here. Where did we find that? Oh, here we go. Patches US randomizer.get patch. So that's calling it there. Maybe if we add something like randomizer.run here, maybe that's what was missing. See, it's always something really small. So yeah, that run method doesn't take any parameters. So where was I here? And also I should make sure to save these. Where was I? Right here. Okay, let's try this again. Maybe that's all I needed. Oops. Ooh, that's not fun. We have an issue here. All right, I think I'm gonna, since we're running a little bit low on time, give up. I will definitely kick myself as soon as we get off stream, since I wasn't able to get this to work. But I'm hoping, yeah. What I'll do probably is on my stream tomorrow. I'm at twitch.tv/tetraly, T-E-T-R-A-L-Y. I can do a continuation of this and hopefully get it working for folks there. But anyway, thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much to Pidge for commentating. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Sorry I couldn't be more help in like trying to figure out what was going on, but I'm confident that you'll find it tomorrow.
Yeah, and that's the thing with programming. It's always something little, and it always comes to you like when you least expect it.
Oh yeah, definitely. I have quite a few stories